So ladies and gentlemen, we've just had a big article come out from Rolling Stone talking to James Gunn about all things DC Studios. And when I say DC Studios, I mean DCU, Elseworlds with the Batman 2. Going into the DCU side of things, we're talking DCU Batman, a recent killed DC project, Superman, all kinds of things. And I didn't necessarily expect for this to drop, so there is a ton of deep diving we're going to do in this video. So if you go on to enjoy this video, help your boy out by leaving a like on it. And one last thing, it turns out that in 2025, so far up until today, 58.8% of you watching these videos are subscribed, which is awesome, but that means 41.2% of you aren't. So I just wanted to remind you of that just in case you're enjoying the videos. Maybe today is the day you'll hit that subscribe button, and I hope you continue to enjoy the content on this channel. But first, before we get into all of that, breaking news here from future or present Boba. Of course, there's news as I was going to edit this video that just released. We have our CLAYFACE casting. So James Gunn said over on Twitter, after a long and incredibly exhaustive search, we finally have our DCU CLAYFACE in Rhys Harries. Both Matt Reeves and I were just blown away by this guy, and I can't wait for you to see this film, directed by James Watkins and written by Mike Flanagan. So deadlines say here, when it came to casting the lead in DC Studios' next big movie, CLAYFACE, the studio went with a fresh face, that being Welsh actor Rhys Harries. Now, I agree in terms of fresh face. He has done things. I recognize him, but I don't feel familiar with his stuff at all. And it says that he landed the role from a competitive list of British thespians. 28 years later, Jack O'Connell. Hunger Games, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, Tom Blythe, and The White Lotus' Leo Woodhall. So, you know me, when we heard about this shortlist, I was like, Jack O'Connell is giving me CLAYFACE vibes, Matt Hagen kind of CLAYFACE vibes, and that would have been my pick, especially after how good he was in Sinners. You know, a bit of momentum there. People might be excited to see him in CLAYFACE as well, but that's not the case. Now, how do I feel about it being a fresh face here with Rhys Harries? I'm not against that at all. Plus, as Gunn said, I do want to say, despite me not being familiar with this guy's work, he said it was a long and incredibly exhaustive search. So they considered a lot of people, and this guy came out on top. So I do think that's important to mention, because he seems to have earned his stripes, so to speak, with his acting chops in how he would be perfect for the role of CLAYFACE. Now, Humberto Gonzalez said, according to an insider, the Matt Hagen version of the character will appear in the film. So Rhys Harries, I guess, meaning he's the Matt Hagen version, which would ring true to what Mike Flanagan said with how Feet of Clay from Batman the Animated Series heavily inspired this CLAYFACE script, and that was surrounding Matt Hagen's version of CLAYFACE, rather than that of Basil Karlo. Now, Matt Reeves is also producing, as they go and say here. I mean, obviously James Gunn said both Matt Reeves and I were just blown away by this guy. And as it says, producing CLAYFACE are Gunn and Safran, as well as the Batman filmmaker Matt Reeves. Now, before there's any conspiracies, oh, Matt Reeves is going to be a DCU. Matt Reeves, as I've said before, if he was working in a store, he would have the badge saying Guru of Batman for DC Studios. Yes, he's got his Elseworlds thing going on over here, but he is basically the Batman guy over there. It doesn't matter what universe it's ending up in. It doesn't matter if it's live action or animation. He's producing Cape Crusader. He's producing Dynamic Duo. He's doing his own epic crime saga movies and spin-off shows with the Batman. So now he's producing CLAYFACE in the DCU. And Gunn did say that Matt Reeves would be utilized as a helpful creative and producer in future DCU stories. Boom, here we have it with CLAYFACE. And that makes me extremely happy, although the script wasn't written by Matt Reeves. But having him produce it is great, because, you know, he's going to be like, kind of like, okay, you know, this is what's going on with Clay. I think that maybe that would make it a little bit better. You know, maybe we should do this that way. I don't know, but like, I love that Matt Reeves is this overseer of Gotham's involvement in all the DC properties, because he does have a good absolutely great vision when it comes to adapting things for Batman, and it's not it's not predicated off of his Elseworlds more noir Batman. He still has fantastic vision for getting into the fantastical side of Batman as well that he can help incorporate and bring to life. So let me know what you think of this, guys. Again, what I'm gonna have to do is some research and watch some of Tom Rhys Harries stuff. I have a lot of reassurance just off the bat, knowing that they did a long and extensive, incredibly exhaustive search. Matt Reeves and James Gunn were blown away by whatever this guy had to do in the audition room. Did he just have to kind of like freak out and mimic being Clayface mid-transformation without CG? I don't know, but if he did, it was convincing, and I'm happy for the guy. I hope it like really works out, and Clayface, you know, they're passionate enough about it at DC Studios, so they really want to pursue this film, and I think it could really be something special, despite, you know, there's always the other commentary, people being like, oh, this is like a Sonyverse movie, but under DC, so we're getting a Clayface movie, and stuff. I still see the vision here. I get why people say that, but clearly things can still really work out. Like, you know, Joker was Elseworlds, but it was still an incredibly popular movie. So if you make a good movie in of itself, and yes, this is a part of the larger DCU, and we've seen Clayface in Creature Commandos, that can still do and tell a great story. And the budget fascinates me, because don't forget, it's an extremely low budget, which in my opinion is a great thing, because it literally encourages and breeds more creative energy into making the movie as amazing as it can be. So again, future Boba, present Boba out. Let's get into past Boba, because we have so much to talk about in today's video. So first of all, when talking about movies needing to have finished scripts before moving on in Hollywood, otherwise it kind of leads to disaster, Gunn said something fairly interesting here that's got a lot of people wondering as to which project this could be about. So he says, yeah, we just killed a project. Everybody wanted to make the movie. It was greenlit, ready to go. The screenplay just wasn't ready. And I couldn't do a movie where the screenplay's not good. And we've been really lucky so far, because Supergirl's script was so freaking good off the bat. And then Lanterns came in and the script was so effing good. Clayface, same thing. So effing good. So we have these scripts that we've been really lucky with, or wise in our choices, or whatever the combination is. So he didn't name which project this is, and this has got lots of people thinking, okay, so what one is it? So first of all, I want to say, no, I don't think it's something like Swamp Thing. That was always miles and miles away, and it's not anywhere near a green light. And to be honest, who knows what James Mangold is up to with the whole Star Wars Dawn of the Jedi thing. But then he was doing the Bob Dylan thing, but that's over, and now there's a new Netflix thing he's doing. So again, it seems miles away. And even James Gunn said that him and James Mangold talk about it occasionally, not too long ago. Now, Gunn said that this project that was canned was a movie. So those of you who are suggesting Booster Gold, nope, that's a series. Definitely not Clayface. So what's left is The Authority. Then we have that Deathstroke and Bane-led project, which could be a team movie with those two being the main characters. And then there's also Sergeant Rock, which, as we know, was reportedly put on hold to be delved into further next year. But there is also Constantine 2. So The Authority, Gunn himself said a little while back, has had some issues by saying it's had a harder time coming along, and it hasn't been much of a priority. But that never meant that it was cancelled. And there was even speculation that it could possibly be turned into an animated movie, as Gunn did say at that DC Studios press address a little while back now, that there's been discussions about, you know, one thing in particular changing to animated. So we all speculated, well, could that be The Authority after he made those comments about how it's had a harder time coming along? So that could still be a thing, and it might not be the one that he recently killed. But if they couldn't make that work, then I guess this could be it, as it is a movie after all. So on the bottom line here, for me, it's between The Authority and Constantine 2, because it also got out not so long ago that Keanu Reeves hasn't really been a fan of the script for Constantine 2. You know, he's been wanting it to be more of a character character-driven Constantine movie compared to making it something like an action spectacle, kind of John Wick-style Constantine film. Like, that's the direction the script was kind of heading in that I covered not so long ago in a news roundup. So maybe Gunn has kind of ripped off the plaster, or Band-Aid, as many of you guys would say, with that one, as it maybe wasn't really getting anywhere. And him literally saying, I couldn't do a movie where the screenplay's not good, would kind of match up to what Keanu Reeves was saying. Again, I recommend checking out my previous, well, not my previous news roundup, but I did cover it in the past. Maybe I'll leave a link to it down in the description box. Now, next up, when talking about could 2010 James Gunn have made Superman, Gunn talks about being offered Superman before, as we know, but also Batman. So he says, I don't think the 2020 James could. Everybody knows I was offered Superman in 2018. They also talked to me about Batman earlier than that, but I was in the middle of Guardians 3. If they had come to me in 2018 with Batman, I would have said yes, but yeah, I just couldn't quite wrap my head around it. Now, I have to admit here, this one's a bit confusing to me because, again, he was offered Superman in 2018, he turned it down, went on to do the Suicide Squad, so on and so forth. At this point, the DCEU was still very much so a thing, but then they talked to him about Batman earlier than 2018, to the point of where he says if he was offered it in 2018, he would have said yes, but before 2018, it's interesting to know when and how. Like, so I think what we know with Matt Reeves is that he was planning the Batman and the script in 2017. There's a whole podcast with him even talking about it, the whole approach with Warner Brothers, and how he said he wanted to do his own thing. All of that goes back to 2017, if you've ever heard me dive into Matt Reeves' comments about that. So I wonder if, like, when they were, like, feeling out Matt Reeves for the position, and they eventually went for him, they also put the feelers out there to James Gunn before 2018, which would be around 2017, I assume, around the time Matt Reeves eventually landed the role for director of the Batman, and then the whole Affleck thing went out the window and it became its own thing. So I assume this is all in that bubble, and I'm kind of glad, to be honest, that it worked out that way in the long run because, you know, we got the Batman, Matt Reeves insisted on doing his own thing, and we got an Elseworlds title, the DCEU fizzled out, now we're getting a new DCU Batman, while the Batman 2 carries along over here. Alright, so before getting into a ton more DCU and Superman details, let's dive into some of the comments about the Batman 2 and Matt Reeves from James Gunn. And oh my god, like, this is going to get interesting as always. So Rolling Stones say, you once said that the fact that Robert Pattinson's Batman is not in this universe was Matt Reeves' choice. Does that mean if it were up to you, you would have just pulled that into your universe? Gunn replied, it would be a consideration. We'd have to think about it. We'd have to think about it. It is not like we've never discussed it. So my thoughts on this is that Gunn has said this before, that of course it has been discussed, because as he put it before, you have to discuss everything. And yeah, like, if I was the head of DC Studios back in 2023, just coming in, talking about everything, that conversation would pop up in the meeting room that I'd be in. Like, of course it makes sense for that to eventually pop up in some kind of conversation, but that doesn't mean it's going to happen, though. It just means that you talked about it. But this doesn't end there, because Rolling Stone then say, I really should clear this up. Is there still a non-zero chance that Matt Reeves' Batman will get sucked into your universe? Long pause. I would never say zero because you just never know, but it's not likely. It's not likely at all. I'll also say that the Batman Part 2 is not cancelled. That's the other thing I hear all the time, that the Batman Part 2 is cancelled. It's not cancelled. We don't have a script. Matt's slow. Let him take his time. Let him do what he's doing. God, people are mean. Let him do his thing, man. Now, I don't know how many more times James Gunn needs to say that the Batman Part 2 isn't cancelled for people to finally believe that, or, you know, that it rides on Superman's box office. That's the real secret thing happening here. James Gunn also said that they don't have a script right now. This is something we've been hearing for a while. I do want to stress that I don't know how long ago this interview took place. But he did also say in that recent Entertainment Weekly article, which was another huge news dump, which I do recommend watching that video as well, that we're supposed to see that script shortly. And I can't wait. And that interview took place in March. And, you know, we're in June now, like midway through June. So I'm not saying he's seen the script, but bottom line to me, like considering the Entertainment Weekly quote was in March, they're expecting it soon. Matt Reeves, yes, he's taken a long time for various reasons, but the script does seem to be right around the corner. And without me repeating myself from across many, many videos, there is time for that if it is eyeing a production date for around March 2026. Like if Matt hands it in, whether it's this month or next month, there is time. And of course, to address the elephant in the room, I know people are going to cling onto James Gunn saying, never say zero because you just never know. And I do want to say it again. He has said this before because, I mean, to me, this is just him acknowledging that anything is literally possible there, like stranger things have happened. So if I'm being extremely candid, I can't, of course, say zero chance. And I understand. I mean, for me, I think I'm always going to, so to speak, cope until that day finally hypothetically came where it's like, oh, he is joining the DCU. I'm continuing what has been said very firmly, like more than a couple of dozen times, it feels like at this point, with receipts of James Gunn saying, not happening, it is separate. And also, to me as well, how could Matt Reeves' Batman kind of be put into the DCU when Gunn is literally talking about going gung-ho on putting the DCU Batman script and movie forward with all of these other quotes about DCU Batman that we've still yet to read out, being separate tonally from Matt Reeves' Batman, so on and so forth. So, if you put all of those contextual things together, it just further solidifies that they would be two separate, tonally separate, stylistically different Batmen. One very much so Elseworlds and one very much so DCU fantastical. But no matter what, that tidal wave of fan speculation about Pattinson being sucked into the DCU will continue, I think, right up until the day a new Batman actor is cast for the DCU. So now back to the DCU, but still Batman here. Rolling Stone say, the Batman script, is that still called The Brave and the Bold? And he says, right now, yeah. Right now. And I think he says that because we also learn that Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow in this same article is now being renamed to just Supergirl, which has got many people to speculate that maybe the titles in the DCU are just going to be like Superman. As we know, it was changed from Superman Legacy to Superman. Now Supergirl. But I know Gunn said right now it's called Brave and the Bold, but are they really going to call it just Batman? When, you have another Elseworlds Batman movie called The Batman and The Batman Part 2. So I am wondering that it might not be called The Brave and the Bold, but it could be called, I don't know if it would be called something like Batman and Son to make it more simpler than The Brave and the Bold, or Batman the Brave and the Bold, just like how Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow was quite a bit longer than just now Supergirl. Now, the next thing to read out is how, tonally different this Batman will be to Reeves' Batman, which I think further solidifies what I've just been discussing. So the Rolling Stones say, in the broadest sense, what needs to be figured out to make those two properties work? Batman in this universe. So Gunn says that Batman has to have a reason for existing, right? So Batman can't just be, oh, we're making a Batman movie because Batman's the biggest character in all of Warner Brothers, which he is. But because there's a need for him in the DCU and a need that he's not exactly the same as Matt's Batman, but yet he's not a campy Batman. I mean, I'm not interested in that. I'm not interested in a funny, campy Batman, really. So we're dealing with that. I think I have a way in, by the way. I think I really know what it's... I just am dealing with the writer to make sure that we can make it a reality. Now, I just want to point out here, once again, I'm sorry if this is driving you insane, he once again distinguishes the fairly big difference. I mean, he literally says there's a need for him to be in a DCU and a need that he's not exactly the same as Matt's Batman. So that does still imply a new Batman actor, but I know there could still technically be an argument that Pattinson's Batman, eventually in the DCU, there will be a need to not make him exactly the same tonally as what he was like in those movies. As for his larger talks about how, obviously you have Matt Reeves' Batman, it's going to be tonally different from that in the DC with our Batman, but he's also not going to be a super campy Batman. He's not interested in that. He's not interested in like a funny and yes, I'm not really interested in seeing a funny, very super campy Batman in the DCU either. But at the same time, don't worry, that doesn't mean you're not going to get a fantastical Batcave like in Grant Morrison's comics, or like the picture you're seeing on screen right now of this panel where Batman showing Damian Wayne the Batcave. Like, we could have a Batcave with a giant-ass penny, a friggin' dinosaur, that could still all be a thing. But you can still do all of that without going fully into the realms of a Batman that is kind of super campy, funny kind of Batman. So my best example of that is, Batman Telltale is a Batman that truly embraces fantastical Batman, but you wouldn't really call it campy Batman. He's still Batman in a fantastical universe, fairly serious, but still, quite different and more fantastical tonally and in other ways as well than Robert Pattinson's and Matt Reeves' Batman, yet you still wouldn't call Telltale Batman campy just because he's quite different from the Matt Reeves, more serious crime, noir, point of view driven, epic crime saga Batman. So that is basically what I think Gunn means there with what he aims to do with a new actor and a new DCU Batman. Gunn then says, "No, I don't. Batman's my biggest issue in all of DC right now, personally. And it's not like I'm not writing Batman, but I am working with the writer of Batman and trying to get it right because he's incredibly important to DC, as is Wonder Woman. So outside of the stuff that I'm doing in the projects that are actively going, our two priorities are finishing our Wonder Woman and our Batman scripts." And that makes total sense to me. I know there was a lot of hesitation, of course, with regards to where is the Wonder Woman and Batman stuff going on in the DC for the past couple of years. People wanted that to be a priority, but they've been paving the road. Superman's now coming out. They're in post-production on Supergirl, so like now they're really going gung-ho of like, okay, we need to lock in Wonder Woman and Batman in the DCU. We're definitely on this. Rolling Stone and saying, how about for Wonder Woman? And Gunn says similar. Wonder Woman, I think, is actually easier for me because there haven't been so many infinite portrayals of Wonder Woman. Definitely not in movies, but really anywhere that there have been of Batman. Every single Batman story has been told. It seems like half the comics that have come out of DC over the past 30 years have Batman in them. He's the most famous superhero in the world and the most popular superhero in the world. And people love him because he's interesting. But also, having so much of him out there can also make him boring. So how do you create that property that's fun to watch? Sure, we had Gal Gadot's Wonder Woman and Wonder Woman way into the past, but even with that being said, you still feel like, I guess, as a result of that, hey, I feel like quite confident in how if I'm going to do Wonder Woman again, amongst recent Wonder Womans, I feel like there is a way in and a way that, I guess, doing a new Batman would feel like, oh, damn, we've had this iteration, that iteration, this iteration, that iteration. How are we going to find a really good way to find this interesting to watch? So it's good to hear that hopefully with Wonder Woman, granted, it must be in the very early stages of being written, possibly, as we've heard recently, that they are quite confident in bringing us a fresh take. So then we have Rolling Stone asking, do you know what you're writing and directing next as far as film? Gunn says, yeah, probably. I know what I'm writing right now. Rolling Stone then say, and it's a DC film? Gunn says, yeah, nothing yet. I'm just getting into it. I really have a hard time writing when I'm in the late stages of post-production, which is, we're almost done, but I really have a hard time. I traditionally start heavily writing the day whatever my last movie comes out. I write treatments first, so I'm a couple of treatments in. This isn't too new. This just comes under the whole speculation of, is it a world's finest, somewhat sort of sequel to Superman, as Gunn said? But a sort of sequel could also mean carrying on the characters of Hawkgirl, Mr. Terrific, Guy Gardner, and adding more members to that Lore Tech team, like Martian Manhunter and other characters to maybe be a Justice League International inspired project, and Gunn going back to his roots of doing a team-led project in the DCU full of those heroes as a somewhat sequel to Superman. We just don't know yet. So many people want it to be World's Finest, and I understand that, but it's cool to hear that he's already a couple of treatments in, and I assume work will be going very swiftly after Superman is kind of out the way and all the press stuff he's doing right now, because they're about to start an insanely busy press tour. Now back to Superman, Gunn talks about something I've had an inkling about for a while, and that is the just overall power scaling of Superman in this universe. Because you may have heard me in videos previously talk about how I've always said that I just feel like this Superman won't be like necessarily crazy overpowered. There are things that I know I don't explain that I don't even want to say out loud, but I wanted Superman to be vulnerable. I see the online things like who would beat whom, Homelander or Superman or effing whatever, Adam Warlock or Brightburn, and I'm like, this is the effing stupidest effing conversation, and I'm saying that for monetization. It's a thing. Like, so then whoever would win this fight means that they're the best, because I'll just go out and write Godman, who can destroy you with a wink, and I win. I win all the fights forever. But I didn't want a Superman who could punch planets. And also, we're creating a whole universe now. So what's a girl with wings got to do in the face of that? So he's a little less powerful. Guy Gardner's pretty effing powerful. They're all pretty powerful. So long story short here, I certainly agree with this, and I do feel like across the footage and stuff like that, that's the vibe that was given across anyway. And I really personally don't mind that, in how kind of I've always said that even without kryptonite or magic, if you pummeled Superman with that kaiju foot 20 times in a row, he would still feel it, like no matter what. Like, but at the same time, there is still a good defense in how there are versions of him where no matter what, unless you got kryptonite or magic, it won't even so much as dent him, or he won't feel a scratch. I personally like a Superman who is still very much so Superman. Bullets bounce off of him. He can hold buildings up. He can punch a kaiju. But at the same time, if you punch him enough, he is still going to feel it. It doesn't make him any less Superman. And I think there's some, if anything, arguably more interesting aspects to tackle there when you can make him a bit vulnerable, even without kryptonite and magic. We also got an interesting comment on Clark Kent's glasses and how through making it that Lois already knows Clark is Superman, he bypassed one of the stickiest issues. How does Lois not see past the glasses? So Gunn then says to this, it comes up again later in the movie and it's explained. She says it, we mention it, and it's a one-off and people chuckle. But there is stuff later in the movie about the glasses that are canon. That's canon in the comics, which is when Rolling Stone then says there's a controversial 70s issue of the comic book where it shows that Superman basically uses super hypnotism to change people's perception of him in the glasses. It was an idea sent in by a fan that has been mostly ignored since. Gunn then says something like that. I only know it from Tom King. The first time we met was at Peter's house. We had this sort of writers group come in. One of those people was Tom King, and he was the most helpful. I'm like, I just don't know how to effing deal with the glasses thing because it bothers the F out of me. All that little stuff that people are like, it's a fantasy, just let it go. I'm like, no, I have to explain everything. Everything for me has to come from a place where I believe it, as outlandish as it is. With Rocket, I could not just make it a talking raccoon. It had to have a real foundation for where he came from and how he came to be, and I needed to believe that. So to me, just on a side note here, I really like hearing him say, no, I have to explain everything, because there are plenty of people, and I really relate to this, who say, it's a fantasy, just let it go. I have so many comments where I might critique something in a review or something where people are like, that's so nitpicky, just suspend your disbelief, let it go. But even James Gunn is saying here, no, I have to explain everything. And there is a fine line here where you can suspend your disbelief with stuff, but sometimes if something is written in such a way in a superhero movie, which this does happen quite often in comic book movies, where it just happens and they don't bother explaining it and they expect the audience to not ask questions, that might not bother you, personally, you watching this right now, but that can be sloppy writing and lead to plot holes and things like that. So I'm just saying that I like that Gunn, at least, I'm not saying he's going to be super successful with this in answering everything. Everything has to have a reason. And there is a fine line of being pedantic with criticism like that and whatnot. But I like that he still goes into making Superman and writes Superman and other stories with that in mind. Now getting onto the glasses, he has come up with a reason behind that. It's not necessarily, as he says, something like that, like the super hypnotism to the glasses, but I am now kind of wondering, has he actually, beyond the joke that he first said, has he actually done something canonically which is going on with the glass? Like, maybe you guys can help fill in what that could be. And then Gunn talks about, how Superman will perform, like the box office and what some people say with the whole, the future of the studio might ride on this movie kind of comments that have been going around. And this is really interesting to hear him address this. So he says, really, I just go, that's their business, because that's not the truth for me. My truth is this is the first movie out of DC Studios. Other people may say it's got to be a home run, nothing else. And I'm like, no, I'd be very happy with a double. Effing Iron Man wasn't the be-all and end-all. It wasn't Avatar. We are doing something that's a piece of the puzzle. It's not the puzzle itself. We have Peacemaker, we have Supergirl, and what we want to do is make a movie that people love, they feel connected to, the characters. It's just this one movie. It's not everything. I hate it when there's an effing article and it's going on about all the problems and blah, 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 blah. And that means even more pressure on James Gunn and Superman. I'm like, guys, I'm not responsible for all of that. I'm responsible for my piece of the pie. I've got to make my budget back. I'll be very happy with that. Now, I'm not saying Superman, and I've not said that it wouldn't make a ton of money. If anything, the projections are very positive right now. But I've always said, look, my bottom of the barrel expectations, or like I would be over the moon if it made more money than that, because it would mean good things for the future of the DCU, right, is 680 to 770 million would be amazing, because that would match roughly the Batman. And I've always said as well that I think the studio, like Warner Brothers, DC Studios, to me, not that I've been in the room, but with the amount of people working there, there's no way they haven't had the conversations of, look, this movie might not do as great as we want it to, or let's just say it was a great movie, or as well as it deserves. Because you need to earn things like the goodwill of the audience back from the days of the DCEU, where movies struggled to make past 400 million in the last like 10-ish DCEU movies. Not every single one, but you get my point. You kind of need to score and hit with this one, and I've said that I think if they're successful with that, all the people who may have skipped out on seeing this at the cinema, whether they catch up with it on streaming or whatever, whether they hear the word of mouth from reviews, from their friends, from critics, that they might be like, oh, I really enjoyed this one, actually. I know I didn't see it in the theater, but now I'm going to see the next one. So basically, this movie, yes, you could argue there's pressure on it. I'm just saying that the DCU with Superman, obviously it would flop if it did like the past DCEU movies, barely broke past 400 mil. That would be bad. I think we can all understand that. But let's be realistic. I mean, this would be funny, clip this if I'm wrong. I think we can all agree it's going to make past 400 mil at the box office and most likely at this point make its budget back. So I think that's all they wanted to do, is lay the foundation, get good word of mouth, have a solid movie, whether people go to see it or not, to the point of where it made way more than its budget back. They would still have got a good reputation and a good first foot forward to then get more people involved with the excitement of the DCU from there on out. That is what I read with what Gunn is saying here. That is the reality of it. I think, yes, they want to make a ton of money, but it's not actually as madly dramatic as people make it out to be through saying things like, if Superman doesn't get past 990 million or a billion, then it's over. Completely over for DC. They're not going to make any more projects. They're going to pull out the rug. They're going to close it all down, kind of like the Monster Universe thing or the Dark Universe. No. And it is premature for me to say this, but I do think that right now with the way things are going, granted we still need the reviews from critics and stuff like that to come out that will still inform a bit of the public opinion about going to see the movie or not. But it does seem that Superman will probably do more than just fine or even better to keep the DCU steamrolling to a brighter future with more projects being greenlit and coming our way. Now, lastly here, another interesting one. Rolling Stone talk about those who actively root against James Gunn. Because Rolling Stone, as they put it, they're fans of a previous incarnation of Superman DC, Zack Snyder's. As Gunn says here, fake surprise, what? As he laughs. Rolling Stone, as you may have heard, Gunn then says, I'm trying to think of how to say this best. I don't mind it. I think it's good. I think you don't want to have everybody root for you. And I have an actor who reads everything online. I won't say who it is, but he'll read this article and he'll know who it is. It's one of the top 5 in Superman. And this actor gets so upset over things that people say. I said, first of all, you realize that the trailer came out and the reaction was 97, 98% positive. These people help us because you don't want everything to seem 100% positive. It's all right to have an opposing force every once in a while. Some of the things get ridiculous. I just know that every time something comes out, it doesn't matter how positively received, there's gonna be something that is of great controversy. It was great controversy that the sun caused Superman pain. But then Rolling Stone said, but that's not what's happening. Like, that was his bones snapping back together, right? Gunn then says, it's like when a doctor resets your bone. You scream. But it doesn't effing matter, because is that really a controversy? Is that really something you're upset about? Or did you have a hard time finding something to be upset about? There's always going to be that. There's going to be something that people are upset about. And it's okay. This actor reads everything. He reads every effing Reddit thread. He watches all of the videos. Hello, if you're watching. Including by the people who make their living by hating us. We all know who those people are. That's how they make all of their money. But you don't have to watch their videos where they're talking about how you're awful. You can't be reading it all the time. It will effing murder you. It's a terrible thing to do to your soul. So where do I begin with this, man? So with the sun thing, that makes sense. It's what we were all speculating. It wasn't so much the sun hurting Superman with that major Saharan prime dose that he got. As Gunn said, it's like when a doctor resets your bone, you scream. So he literally had fractured ribs. He had I think torn organs and things like that. Now the sun is like fixing all of that, like snapping a bone or like putting a bone, your shoulder back into place or whatever within a second. That would hurt Superman internally, like, right? So it's not so much the sun, it's what the sun causes within his body to fuse back into place super fast. That would, in theory, hurt. And anyone with a broken bone knows that if you kind of move it slightly, you get such a mechanical bone sharp burning pain, and it is horrible. Superman felt all of that at once, so that kind of would hurt if that super speeds up the healing more so than just soaking in the sun would. But back to like the main thing of what all of this was about, I kind of get what he's saying, and if anything, I feel bad for whoever this actor is on Superman. Now, he denies that it was David Corenswet because they straight up ask him, was it David Corenswet? Of course he would deny it, whether it was true or not. So it could be him, but it might not be him. It could be Nicholas Hoult. He said it's in the top 5, whoever this actor is. And he says he, but he could have been saying he deliberately because it could be a she, like Lois or someone. But the larger point is, like, this would happen regardless. Like, the example being used of the sun hitting Superman was a good one because Gunn said, like, yeah, he pointed it out, well, it is just kind of like when a doctor resets your bone, but like, does it even effing matter? Like, that is the kind of thing that starts a big controversy online, and that was a big talking point across social media online. Maybe you're watching this right now, you're not on social media as much, but something as small as that these days, with fan discourse, something as small as that will create like a massive controversy, and it is pretty silly. I'm not saying it can't be questioned, but the instant reaction for a lot of people is like a negative assessment of it rather than trying to kind of think, okay, is there a reason behind this? Oh, actually, wait, it's not just the sun doing it, which would be not so comic accurate. But what if it was the bones just snapping back? Actually, that makes some sense. But they didn't get that far. It's instantly this is bad. James Gunn doesn't get Superman. So you see what I mean? That at this point in time where we are at as a society is just the way things are. It is just the way things are. And Gunn seems to understand that. And again, for me, it just goes back to whoever this actor is. And maybe they haven't delved into the online side of things so much because this is a new experience for them. So they're seeing all kinds of discourse and all kinds of different Reddit threads and YouTube videos. I don't know. I hope that it's not getting to them too much. Maybe it doesn't, and they're just doing it as kind of this assessment, like I do. I mean, granted, I do this I do this kind of thing on my channel, but I kind of soak it all up to get a general perspective of every side of the camp, or on whether you're like super negative about this stuff, you don't believe it for X, Y, and Z, or you do, right? Maybe they just want to gauge and get like a comprehensive view on what like the public town square online is saying about your upcoming movie. But ladies and gentlemen, I am going to end this video here. As usual, a big fat ramble. There's been a lot discussed here. So you know what I'm going to say. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Would greatly appreciate a like. As you guys know, consider subscribing to just get more videos like this on the channel. But I'm going to love you and leave you. So again, thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a lovely rest of your day. And I'll see you people of the DCU in the next video. Goodbye.